Honestly.
So we're working with them, trying to get it squared away.
Excellent. Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, and I would like to call to order the January 28th meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the January 14th meeting. It's in your packet. Are there any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? And it passes. Next item is the consent docket. Just a few items on the consent docket today. Actually, most of the first four of them are renewals of pricing agreements. And then there's a couple of easements on there also. Is there any items on the consent docket that any of the trustees would like to poll for discussion or individual consideration? I'm seeing none. Therefore, is there a motion to approve the consent docket? And it passes. There's one item on the concurrence docket. It's a concurrence with the City of Oklahoma City on a drainage project west of Western in the vicinity of Northwest 63rd Street. There are no Aquit funds involved in the project. Any questions regarding that? Is there a motion for approval? And it passes. There are no emergency construction contracts, so now we are on items for individual consideration. We have a resolution approving and authorizing acceptance of one or more drinking water state revolving fund loans from the Oklahoma City Water Resources Board in the aggregate principal not to exceed $2.5 million. Do we have a brief discussion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So a number of years ago, EPA mandated a lead service line replacement program to all utilities across the nation. And the program requires the utility to identify the potential for lead service lines both on the private side, from the meter to the building, and from the also from the public side, the main to the meter. And so the large utilities were to have this information available to the property owners by October of '24. So we're in compliance with that piece. To get there, we did a tabletop study of our records to see where the service lines may be located relative to the time in which the buildings or homes were built. And we found there were about 37,000 potential private lead service lines and about 12,000 potential public lead service lines. So rather than telling everybody we think you might have a service line, we secured funding from the Oklahoma Water Resources Board last year to go out and field verify. And so we field verified 4,250 sites. This loan, there was a cap on how much we could get for each year. So this loan will enable us to do 5,000 sites. So we'll go out, have the contractor dig down both sides of the meter and verify the actual material there. The good thing about this loan is it's $1.25 million is forgiven, and the remaining $1.25 million is interest free. So it's a really good deal for us. So anyway, with your approval, we will move forward with this phase 2 of the project. By the way, we only found, I believe it was 173 lead lines in the first round.
Lead lines on house lines or service lines?
On our side.
Yeah,
we didn't find any on the private side.
Really?
And that seems a little odd, but yeah.
I am surprised by that.
Yeah.
All right.
But we're going into areas now where there's a higher possibility.
Okay. Any questions regarding the item? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? And it passes. Items from trustees, anything this afternoon? General manager reports, Mr. Browning.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of things. First of all, I'll give you the status, the lake level status. So Hefner is still above full pool by nearly 4/10 of a foot. Draper is below full pool by about 3.5 feet, but that's an improvement over last year at this time. So we're doing pretty well at the two lakes here. Canton has recovered to around a half a foot below full pool. Atoka is 0.27 feet above, and McGee Creek is 0.6 above. But we're supposed to get some pretty significant rains down there this weekend, so I expect those lake levels will be coming up. Next item, we have Dennis Whaley here with PFM. We have been studying our financing options for our capital improvement program, and he is going to give us a brief presentation on what those options may be. So, Dennis.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Whaley with PFM. We're the financial advisor to the city. Let's see if I can, oh yeah. So we're going to briefly talk about your debt portfolio, your commercial paper program, the key point here, financing considerations, and then we'll give you a brief market update. So the debt portfolio for Aquit consists of basically two liens, a senior lien of revenue bonds and a junior lien, which is composed of Water Development Board loans. The senior lien taxable bonds you see here, $240 million, provided for an amendment to the indenture that allowed you to begin to issue debt without a debt service reserve fund, which was fantastic. It saved you a lot of money. You don't have to borrow for a debt service reserve fund. And after that transaction, your rating was affirmed at AAA, so it did not have a negative impact on your rating. The tax-exempt transaction was done a couple of years ago, and that was to take out tax-exempt commercial paper as well as to provide some new money for Aquit. And then, as the general manager said earlier, continuing to access Oklahoma Water Resources Board loans for low-interest financing. I don't think I have anything that rivals 0% financing, but I'll keep trying. This is just a snapshot of your debt outstanding. The blue bars are principal, tan bars are interest, and you'll see that you have a lot of capacity in the outer years for additional borrowing, which is good considering the size of Aquit CIP. And coming to Aquit CIP, over the next 5 years, Aquit CIP is about $2.7 billion. And over the 10-year period, it's about $5.8 billion. Some large projects that consume quite a bit of that CIP are the Atoka Pipeline, $560 million, and the Deer Creek project, which is about $130 million. We haven't done this in a while. We used to show you the commercial paper program, and that was in compliance with its policies. I can say that the program is in compliance with its policies. Authorization, which is per an order a couple years ago of how much you can spend under the CP program before you have to approve another order to go out and spend more. You have a program currently of $350 million. And as of today, none is outstanding. And then you have procurement authorization. So under the CP program, not only do you borrow money, but you appropriate projects with a spending through the CP program. So before you ever spend a dollar, you have to appropriate dollars to start the project. Right now, there's about $262 million appropriated where dollars have not been spent under the CP program. So this is what we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about, the fact that Aquit needs appropriation capacity for these projects, although it takes time, sometimes years, to spend all the dollars to complete a project. In addition to this 262 outstanding, You have about 37 million, which will be consumed by pipeline purchase order. And then you also, in the near future, will be needing appropriation for a pump station. So we are running out of available capacity for the CIP. Little good news in here. With the current rate adjustments that are set through 2029, your financial forecast looks very sound. Your coverage meets your financial policies. Your cash on hand looks very good. So we are in a good position to continue with our CIP needs. And the next time you will need to visit rate adjustments will be for the year 2030. So you have a little lead time. So how can Aquid increase its capacity to award more projects over the next 10 years? As we discussed on page 8, Aquid is constrained. Your ability to access the long-term fixed rate market is outstanding, but that's not really what our situation is. Our situation is to be able to continue with our CIP in the short term. So a few options have been vetted for further evaluation. That would be the commercial paper program, looking at extendable commercial paper, looking again at a banknote program, and of course continue using fixed rate borrowing and OWRB loans. So to talk a little bit more about each of those options, the commercial paper program could be expanded up to $500 million. This would be a very straightforward amendment and the fast way to get a little additional capacity. We do have a verbal okay from the bank, but it would need to go through credit committee, but we're off to a good start on commercial paper. Another product available in the market is called extendable commercial paper. We're in the exploratory process on this. We have worked with bond counsel and they are reviewing. Preliminarily, we feel it would be doable under state law, but still a little work to do that. It would provide additional appropriation capacity, and it is very cost effective. You do not have a letter of credit, you do not have ongoing fees. The downside to ECP is you have a limited buyer market. So if you ever issued the paper, in other words, borrowed money, you will have a situation where at the end of the term of that loan, it will need to be remarketed. If it cannot be remarketed, it will go to a very high rate of interest, which you would not want to ever have happen to you. So the use of extendable commercial paper would only be for appropriation. We would never want to go out and use it. We would always go back to our commercial paper program for any cash borrowing. Banknote program. We looked at this once before. There was limited bank appetite. Could have been the size of the program. I'm sorry.
So what you're talking about on the doesn't work when you're not connected to it either. What you're talking about on the extendable commercial paper program. So right now we're required to have a letter of credit on the base commercial paper program, and we have fees for underutilized fees. Like it sets a target, is that right?
In your current commercial paper program, you have a letter of credit and you pay a fee for that letter of credit.
Oh, okay.
And then
And on the unutilized fees,
there's no unutilized fee
Got it.
on your commercial paper program.
got it, okay.
Now, when we talk about the banknote program, that leads into this very well. A banknote program does have fees for the unutilized portion. So it is a more expensive solution. That doesn't mean it's a bad solution, just a little more expensive solution. As I mentioned, there was limited bank appetite. That could have been due to the size. Could also have something to do with, we have some state issues as far as energy laws. Now, when I say that, it kind of sounds like, well, gosh, nobody wants to invest in the city of Oklahoma City, but that's far from true. You're AAA rated. We just got RFP responses back for the arena project. We received 16 responses. So there's significant interest in the city of Oklahoma City. And then we'll continue to use long-term fixed rate debt as our staple for borrowing money, as well as OWRB. So what are our possible solutions, and how would each of these solutions help us? Of course, expand the commercial paper program gives us greater appropriation capacity. It'll also give us greater borrowing capacity. We'll further explore extendable CP. We'd only want to use that for appropriation capacity. If we explore a banknote program, it would increase appropriation and borrowing capacity. Of course, use long-term fixed-rate bonds for commercial paper refunding and any immediate new money needs, as well as, once again, OWRB. So this is just to inform you of our challenges and what some options might be, and then we will come back to you at a later date with possible recommendations of a path forward. So we'll do a very fast market update, show you where rates are. Rates are off their highs, but still much higher than they have been in the past. Last fall, you probably heard, most people thought we'd have 4 Fed rate cuts this year. Now we're down to somewhere between 0 and 2 currently. So the news is not as good on the interest rate front today. Where's the tax-exempt municipal bond market? So this looks at over the last 10 years where rates have been for each one of the maturities. And you'll see the percentage at the top is the percent of time that rates have been lower than they are in the current market. The current market is the blue line going across. The maximum rate we've seen over the past 10 years is the green plus. Minimum, those were the good old days, is the red bar, and then the average. So what is this? That was to say a lot, but we're not as bad as it could be, but rates are still much higher than where they've been over the last 10 years. We're above the average. This is my busiest chart. This is the steepness of the yield curve. So we plotted the steepness of the yield curve over the last 10 years. And you'll see that there is a blue dot in the lower right quadrant, which is where we are today as far as steepness. Yield curve is relatively flat. And that would say for us to issue, when we issue long-term debt, to see if we can have shorter calls, because it is anticipated that rates will be going lower in the future before they go much higher. Now, market conditions will dictate whether we could have an optional call shorter than 10 years, but it's what we want to strive for. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much. Glad to answer any questions.
So Dennis, when you look at the study and the recommendations you're going to bring back on the financing, will you look at that in relation to our current policy and what might need to change in the current policy, and then also where we would stand based on these recommended changes on our debt coverage ratios? Will you analyze all of that as a part of that?
Yes, sir. I'll bring all that back when we show you a recommendation, how it impacts you.
Great, great.
Any other questions for Mr. Whaley?
Thank you very much.
That's a
I
big,
appreciate it.
that's a big number.
So the next item, Mr. Chairman, is an update on the South Canadian wastewater treatment facility. So Joy Cody.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and trustees. Like Mr. Browning said, I'm here to provide a quarterly update on our largest wastewater construction project in progress today, our South Canadian Improvements Project. So here's a current snapshot of our progress. Our completion to date is about 55% I'm so sorry, these numbers are not correct. Anyway, we are actually about 59% complete in both our project billing and our time elapsed on the project. We're still holding on our Phase 1 estimated completion date in February of 2026 and final completion in 2027. The difference between those dates is that for substantial completion, we complete all of our infrastructure from the headworks to our re-aeration building through our secondary treatment process, and the remaining time on the contract is to demolish existing structures and tie up loose ends. So some of my notes here are a little bit different than what we have. I think we had a mix-up on the presentation. No problem. Anyway, our clarifiers have been complete. They're currently being water tested. We've continued water testing due to some crack injection and other things we needed to work on. Generators are already set in place. We're also water testing our aeration basins, which are the largest concrete structures on the project. The filter complex has been completed and is also being water tested. And we are continuing to work on HVAC and piping in our administration and disinfection buildings. For our next 90 days, we are more so moving towards our electrical and INC and HVAC portions. Almost all of our structural concrete on the project has been completed, which is a huge milestone for us, and we are actually anticipating startup activities beginning in May of this year. In addition to that, we'll continue to water test in our grit vortex building and finish the filter complex. We have some roofing that's going in on some of our buildings. We're about halfway there on roofing, and we also expect to see more progress on our ancillary pump stations. So I have a couple of areas here that we're looking at. Again, this is not our updated presentation, but we can provide that for you at a later date. But our grid vortex and overall building are complete. We are working on coating the inside of the grid vortex building, the building to the right, that has 2 circles. Those are for our vortex chambers of settling heavier particles out of our wastewater at the beginning of the treatment process, and also working on doing some coating inside the brick masonry building. Our aeration basins are in pretty good shape. We do have a little bit of crack injection based on our leak testing. We've tested 1 chamber and we're now shifting to the second. The clarifiers are complete and are still undergoing water testing, some nice algae-filled water there. And our pump station has made significant progress as well. This pulls water from our aeration basins, separates sludge for our biological treatment process, and pushes the remaining effluent to our clarifiers. Clarifiers are still undergoing water testing, but we're looking forward to installing some of our mechanical equipment inside the clarifiers once we finish crack injection. Now, the filter complex actually has water in it right now. We're currently doing water testing there, so we've seen some significant progress in the last 90 days. And we have also made progress on both the chlorine contact basin and our disinfection building. So we are almost ready to water test that structure. Primary electrical is complete. We have our generators set in place, and as we begin our startup and commissioning activities in May of this year, we'll be essentially powering the medium voltage redundant loop that powers the entire plant. So once we're able to get the juice, then we're able to start pulling up pieces of equipment and commissioning entire systems at the plant. And in my useless attempt to avert questions, I've provided an ooh and ah drone footage presentation courtesy of Crossland Heavy Contractors. But that's it for my update. Like I said, we did have a slight snafu with the presentation, but no problem. We're more than happy to provide updated drone footage and photos for you all whenever you'd like them.
So that you say you're 59%, 60%, both on draw and days. It looks a lot further along than that.
Sorry?
It looks a lot further along than that. So when is the completion date?
So the key that I think sometimes we miss on these projects is the startup process. If we look at, say, a general contractor, they're saying, I need to get this structure completed by this time. They're focusing on steel, concrete, pipeline, and earthwork. For us, I'm looking at a certain turndown range for a variable frequency drive with a blower, right? So we have a varying degree of detail that we have to focus on. Startup is tricky because no matter what happens, we have to have a facility that's functional and gives us everything we need per the design. Sometimes when general contractors shift to having the subcontractors take over on the electrical, instrumentation and stuff, as we begin functional testing, performance testing, we do run into some issues along the way. So we're going to need every bit of that 40% to make sure that we have the correct startup for this entire facility.
And target startup is,
I'm sorry.
the target startup date?
Our startup will begin in May of this year. Our completion for startup is anticipated in February of next year.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. And the last item is an update on the Atoka pipeline. Larry Hare.
Good afternoon. How are y'all doing? The Atoka pipeline, as you know, is about 100 miles long. Right now, I currently have 2/3 of it bid and under construction. Out of 3 new pump stations, I have 2 of those bid and also under construction. Starting from the beginning to the end, WC 0878, I'm sorry, WC 660, Pump Station O, we had a pre-construction meeting in November, and they began site work on the 15th of this month. 871, since I was jumping ahead of myself, is by Oscar Renda. They are putting in new cathodic protection along the pipeline. Pretty much all of it, almost all of it is complete. As they are completing sections of it, they are also pressure testing it along the way. We expect to have this completed in October of 2025. WCU 872, the contractor is McKee Utilities. Now, I want to say that McKee Utilities has gotten the rest of our pipe contracts so far. We had the pre-work meeting for this particular project last week, and so we'll start to see some site activities here pretty soon. We expect this to be complete in June of 2028. 873 from Stonewall to Ada. The road tunnels are complete. The pipe is 100% installed, and we expect this to be complete in April of this year. A lot of site restoration work has also happened. Oops. $874 is a very difficult job that went through the town of Ada. It is 100% installed. They are doing the final tweaks on the cathodic protection. The hydro testing is complete. The site restoration is almost complete. And as you can see, it just looks like a boring field now, which is what we want. We expect to have a final walkthrough in the kind of like mid-February of this year. Skipping the river project, since it's already complete, we're going from the river to the Econowa pump station. They began clearing and grubbing activities, and we expect this project to be complete in July of 2027. I have the Econowa pump station pretty much kind of under construction. No, well, not quite yet. We have the pre-construction meeting coming up in about a week. Or tomorrow, actually, and we expect this to be completed in March of 2028. 877 from the Econowa pump station to about halfway to the Macomb pump station. We're about 50% installed on the pipe, and we expect this to be completed in July of this year. Since they're completing the other projects, they're putting in another crew in on this project right here to expedite construction. The only other projects I have left to hopefully be bid all within this calendar year is the tail end of the pipeline from halfway to Macomb all the way to Draper, as well as my third pump station here at Stonewall, and the interim surge facilities at Colgate, Ada, and Macomb. And with everything that hopefully works out, we will have this completed and operational by either the end of 28 or the beginning of 29. With that, I'll take any questions you may have.
It's going, big project.
We're moving right along.
Any questions for Mr. Hare? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right. I'm not aware of any citizens that have signed up to speak, so there's no further business, so therefore we are adjourned.